So what do we have next on the docket for you guys, chat? I think it's this one here. Let me pull this up. Yep, this is the one I want. Okay. So as some of you guys may know, there's been this big, case going on in the Supreme Court right now regarding the issue of transgender healthcare, gender affirming care for minors. If you're not familiar with this, I'm going to read this brief little snippet of this article on the SCOTUS blog that kind of dives into it a little bit, and then we'll get into what I actually want to take a look at here. So, it's a Supreme Court to hear challenge to ban on transgender healthcare for minors. This was published on December 3rd. I've been meaning to talk about this with you guys for a while, but I've been a little bit busy, so we're getting to it now, though. But in any case, here we go. Let's dive into this article. The Supreme Court on Wednesday will hear a challenge to a Tennessee law that bans the use of puberty blockers and hormone therapy for transgender teens. The dispute could be one of the most significant decisions of the term, and with similar laws in 23 other states, the court's ruling is likely to have broader implications for the protections available to transgender people across the country. Enacted in 2023, the Tennessee law known as SB 1 declares that the state has a, quote, compelling interest in encouraging minors to appreciate their sex, particularly as they undergo puberty. SB 1 prohibits doctors from performing surgery, a ban not at issue before the justices. This is the funny thing about it, though. It's like, so we've talked about this quite a few times on stream when we're talking about like gender affirming care for minors. But when you're talking about like sex reassignment surgery or whatever, this is not something that's happening, okay? You can talk to some of the most vocal trans activists in regards to like, fighting for the rights of, trans like teens or whatever. None of them are advocating for bottom surgery being performed on like kids. Like that's not a thing. That's something that conservatives will go on and on and on about, the quote general mutilation of children, and that's just not something that's happening. But in any case, that's one of the things that this is prohibiting performing sex reassignment surgery on kids, something that's not happening anyway. But okay, so it says that, or prescribing puberty blockers or hormone therapy to affirm the gender of transgender teens. The law, however, allows the use of the same treatments for other purposes. For example, puberty blockers may be used to treat young people experiencing early puberty, while hormone therapy can be used for young people for whom puberty is delayed. Okay, this is really funny to me, because a lot of times when you'll talk about like, when conservatives will talk about, banning like hormone replacement therapy and like puberty blockers, their argument is like, oh, these things can do irreparable harm to children, right? Like, oh, you cannot allow this because it does like, irreversible harm to children or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, that's what you think. That's not true. The science doesn't show that. But like, it's okay for like these other uses though. Like you're perfectly fine. So this isn't an issue of like kids using these types of prescriptions because you think it's damaging to them. It's just an issue of trans teens using these prescriptions. Okay? I've talked about this before, and I'll say it again, especially later in this segment. This is not about kids, okay? That's the, like, scapegoat that they use to pass these, like, anti-trans laws or whatever, but this is not about protecting kids. This is about erasing trans people from existence, okay? That's all this has ever been about. Because if this really was about the protection of kids, and if they really truly believed that hormone therapy and puberty blockers was harmful for children, then they wouldn't have any exceptions to it at all. They would say that no kid under any circumstances should be using puberty blockers or should be using hormone therapy because we think that stuff's harmful to kids. But that's not what's happening. They're allowing an exception for these types of drugs for cisgender kids who need them for like legitimate medical reasons. To be clear, these are legitimate medical reasons that, a kid may need to use this stuff. But like it just kind of shows a little bit of the hypocrisy there. They want to go on and on and on about how these treatments are harmful for children, but then they're like, oh, by the way, for these particular instances, we're gonna allow it. Like, so is it harmful for kids or not? Like, just be honest. Just be honest. This isn't about you think these drugs are harmful for kids. You're just against trans people. That's what this is. Three transgender teens and their parents filed a lawsuit against the state officials responsible for enforcing the ban, emphasizing that the drugs now barred by SB 1 have been a lifeline for the teens. They argued that the law violates the Constitution's guarantee to equal protection. Okay, so I just wanted to read that little bit of this article to give you guys a little bit of backstory into what we're about to look into, because when this case was being heard in the Supreme Court, we had several protests, some for, pro-trans rights, some for anti-trans rights, going on outside the court. And I wanted to take a look at this video here. This is Daily Wire's Matt Walsh. We are not going to rest until every child is protected, until trans ideology is entirely erased from the earth. Yes, you read that right. But let's hear it in the words of Matt Walsh himself. Let's go ahead and let's play the video. And let's see what Matt had to say here. So here we go.
Now, the other side claims that this is a case about rights. They say that the Tennessee law infringes on the
Lady Juvet says he said the quiet part out loud. Yeah, he literally did.
Rights of so-called trans kids. There are a few problems with that claim. First of all, there's no such thing as a trans kid.
There actually are. This is a thing. Trans kids do exist. There are kids that do experience things like gender dysphoria. This does exist. I know that you, in your little hateful, bigoted fucking mind, refuse to believe that this is a thing that exists, but it does. And the science backs it up that yes, kids can experience gender dysphoria. You fucking idiot.
That doesn't exist. Those kids are not trans. They are confused. And their confusion has been exploited by quacks and abusers. They are abuse victims. They are not trans kids.
So if you support the rights, if you support the ability for children, their doctors, and their parents to make decisions about their health care based on the science that says that, like, okay, if a kid is experiencing, symptoms of gender dysphoria, and, between the doctor and the parents, they come to the conclusion that, hey, you know what? It looks like, gender affirming care may be an appropriate treatment for your child in this case. That's the way that medical treatment should go. This should be a discussion when it comes to kids between the kids, their doctor, and their parents, okay? If the medical professional comes to the conclusion that, yes, it looks like your child is suffering from gender dysphoria, here's how we should treat that, okay? You're saying that that's abuse. A doctor administering treatment to a patient is abuse. Unbelievable.
Second, the law in Tennessee isn't banning kids from doing anything. It's banning doctors from causing permanent damage to kids. This is a ban targeting doctors and parents who are abusive and who are themselves targeting children.
So, again, if parents take their children to the doctor and the doctor determines, hey, based on, the WPATH standard of care that we've undergone to diagnose your child, we've determined that your child is suffering from gender dysphoria, and as a result, they would require treatment in the form of gender affirming care, and the doctor gives that advice to the parent, and the parent decides that they want their kid to undergo this treatment. They decided that decision because they want what's best for their kid. That is abuse in the eyes of Matt Walsh. Getting medical treatment for your kid in the eyes of Matt Walsh is abuse.
So what the trans activists, what the people over there are actually claiming is not that kids have a right to be castrated, but that doctors have the right to castrate them.
That is not what they're saying at all. That is you misrepresenting what trans advocates are saying in support of trans kids.
They are fighting for the right of adults to abuse and harm and mutilate and permanently damage and destroy children. That's what all those people over there are fighting for. It's disgusting. It's evil. Now, third, finally, with all that said, I actually agree with the premise, sort of. This case is about the rights of children. It's about the right of a child to be protected from the gender butchers. That's what it's about. Children have the constitutional right, the human right, the God-given right to live and grow and learn about themselves and the world without being indoctrinated and exploited by people who reject the fundamental realities of existence.
I think it's really funny when he talks about like rejecting the fundamental realities of existence, when the majority of the medical community agrees that yes, trans people do exist. Gender affirming care is a legitimate treatment for things like gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a very real condition that lots of trans people deal with. These are very real things that are backed up by the scientific and medical community. So it's really funny when you hear him talk about how like they want to like, what was the phrasing he used? Let me hear what he said again.
God-given right to live and grow and learn about themselves and the world without being indoctrinated and exploited by people who reject the fundamental realities of existence.
The fundamental realities of existence. He's saying they reject the fundamental realities of existence. Meanwhile, the science says that, yes, trans people exist. Gender dysphoria is a very real condition that a lot of trans people deal with, and gender affirming care is the appropriate treatment for that. How are you going to go on and on about people like rejecting the reality of existence or whatever when you're the only one who's doing that here?
Children have a right to go through phases, to have moments of confusion and discomfort in their own bodies, just like every generation of children before them, without that confusion being seized upon as a pretext.
Sounds about the same as telling women suffering from PMS that they are just being crazy. Well, I mean, we see a lot of this kind of stuff from like bigoted people all the time, right? Like you look at like, for example, we've seen this a lot with like women who are lesbian or bisexual. They'll just tell them, oh, you just want attention, right? You're not actually gay or you're not actually bi. You're just looking for attention or something like that. Or, you know, for a gay man, for example, oh, you're not gay, you're just confused or something like that. Like this is like a common thing. They try to like convince you that what you feel in your own being isn't based on reality, that you're crazy or something like that.
It tends to do irreparable harm to their bodies. So to the trans activists over there claiming this is all about the rights of children, I say again, yes, you're right, it is. They have a right to be protected from you. Children have a right to be protected from all of those people over there who want to harm them and damage them and destroy them. And they will be. They are going to lose. They are losing right now. We are not going to let them harm our children. This case is just the beginning of the fight. It is not the end. We are not going to rest until every child is protected, until trans ideology is entirely erased from the earth.
He said the quiet part out loud. As Lady Zubat said in the chat, I've said this numerous times on this channel when we're talking about the issue of gender affirming care for minors and like conservatives being very outspoken against it. This is not about kids. It has never been about kids or protecting kids. That is the scapegoat they will use to make it about like, oh, we just care about the safety of kids or whatever. If that's the case, then why are so many of these laws not just taking away the right to access to gender affirming care for minors, but a lot of these states, they're also outlawing it for adults. Wait a minute. I thought this was about protecting kids. If it's about protecting kids, then why are we outlawing these things for adults as well? It doesn't really make sense because it's never been about the kids. That's the scapegoat they use to try and trick normal people into sharing the same views with them. They just want to erase trans people from existence. That's what this has always been about. It's the same thing with like the, you know, men in women's sports thing or whatever. They don't give a fuck about women's sports. I mean, for years, like, men have mocked women's sports about how, like, who watches, like, the WNBA and stuff like that. Nobody takes women's sports seriously. And, like, anytime, like, a female athlete would complain about their compensation in compared to, like, men's compensation in sports, it's like, oh, boo-hoo, cry me a river. They never, ever, ever gave a shit about women's sports until this issue came up. And even now, they don't care. Just like with the kids, that's a scapegoat that they can use just to try and take the rights away from trans people. That's all this ever has been.
That's what we're fighting for. and we will not stop until we achieve it.
Okay, so he said the quiet part out loud. He openly admitted this isn't about kids. This is about erasing trans people from existence. That's what these conservatives want to do, chat. They don't want to just protect kids. They're not just concerned about, like, can these, like, drugs potentially, like, hurt children or whatever? They don't actually give a fuck about any of that stuff. They just want, if you happen to be a trans person in my audience, and I know there are trans people who do watch my content, they just don't want you to exist. They want to erase you from existence, and they want to outlaw your existence. That's what they want. That's what this has always been about.